Well, it's time to start a new one, and this is Evening Ink. It's going to be a landscape with a lot of mood. You can see the iPad reference to my right. That's a very cool gadget. Really works well, but it's just a reference. In this case, I might follow it a little bit more because it's a different coloring for me. It's dark. I don't mind dark, but it is dark. Now, I wasn't able to capture the palette on this one because this is one of the earlier test videos for this project. I like to start a landscape at the top because I have a great stopping point at the horizon, especially if it's going to be a multiple day session. Now, this here painting is a one session painting. It was executed over a period of maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours. It's not necessarily true on a portrait or still life or even koi fish, which we'll get to at some point or another. I'll work completely across. This YouTube project, which is basically what this is all about, it's taken a long time to put together, about 3 months in fact, maybe 4. You had to get used to working in front of the camera and making sure that you had the camera on when you were actually painting. That was a little bit tricky. Today I learned how to actually use the mic. That's been a good one. Bought several mics, never could get them to completely work, but now I've got it, and I like it. I don't think we'll have any problems with this anymore. In fact, I'll start talking while I'm painting. I have a more natural way of doing it instead of this voiceover. But you can see I'm still working on that sky. I'm putting in some of the heat, the perimeter heat of the sun. I'm working down to the horizon, which is also a great place to stop. And you can see I work fairly fast at that. This video is pretty much all of the painting. I did edit it to remove lag time at the palette. Otherwise, this would be about an hour and a half for the complete process. Sometimes a bit more, but basically an hour and a half. Now I'm starting to add the clouds, the darker clouds in. And I guess the reason for the title, Ink, Evening Ink. This is where I merged the upper part and the lower part that's more saturated in together. And I do this fairly loosely. It's not random. It is pretty deliberate. You'll notice that I'm working in rhythms, color rhythms, or movements. Movement is probably a better word, but it does have rhythm to it. And I paint to music, so therefore I paint to it in the same speed. You'll see now I'm merging in and being fairly fluid about that. I'm not following the reference particularly here or trying to copy any specific piece of it. I'm just moving with the color and the movement of that color throughout the painting from side to side. Very often I'll use a circular motion to do this process, and you'll see it here a little bit, but a lot later on when I start to noodle. Bounce around, kind of catching all the areas, closing it up a bit. So there's that circular motion and the twisting of the brush, or the twirling of the brush, really. And the music is probably going. I typically listen to Pandora in the background, and easy listening. So it kind of covers a broad range of music, but it's all about similar in tempo. I found that at some point a painting takes on a life of its own, and you just have to go with it, regardless of what you're looking at on the side there. Sometimes it happens early in the game, and sometimes a little bit later on, but it does happen. And it happens on this one and most every painting I've ever painted. And if you're smart, you'll follow the painting, and you'll get a better result for it. The reason I'm able to follow these rhythms, these color rhythms, is because I paint shapes. And you can glance at a shape very quickly in a reference and get it and transpose it onto the canvas in nanoseconds. You get the shape of outer shape of a horse right, you'll probably get the interior a bit better, and you'll keep at it until you make it perfect. Wipe it off if you don't, but keep at it or do another one. If you don't paint daily, and you have 3 or 4 days or a week separating sessions, that makes it harder to paint. And I mean a lot harder, because you're really not in the same mode, and you have to start over painting, and a painting gets overcooked very easily. And there are ways to get around that. you can have stopping points in a painting. This painting has got many, but the best one really is at the horizon. And you might find out that if you take 4 or 5 days off on it and you come back, the top and bottom won't necessarily match. So, because you'll forget the colors that you were using, how to mix them and all that other stuff. When the palette gets into these things, which will be shortly, because I have figured out how to do it. I haven't figured out how to line it up, but have figured out how to do it, and do have film on it. You'll see how fast that mixing operation really is. In fact, you could do a video on it. It's fascinating how color moves around, and that it isn't often any one specific color. But just as long as it's dark or light, or warm or cool, that you go for. Because I adjust my colors, you may notice it on this, but I adjust my colors and everything directly on the canvas. I don't use the palette that much, other than to accumulate paint. And I work off a central pile. But that thing of daily painter, or coming back to it fresh, each day, no one likes to have, I don't like to go beyond 8 days on a painting, period, regardless of size, unless I've structured it that way. I can work on sections of it, because they become overcooked very easily. There is no mud, there's only good mud. And if you mix it all up, you'll see that mud is a color, a tone of something, and you work off of that and you keep on going. You'll notice here, I just used a wipe to wipe out an area. I use baby wipes, Huggies more specifically, unscented. They really work. I'll talk about them more later. But if you get a space there where you want to clear it out, best thing is to take it out straight up, or at the end of the day, make sure it doesn't dry. Remove anything that you don't like, because tomorrow's another day and you'll have a fresh mind, and actually by the time you get toward the end of a painting, you start to get tired. And when you start to make mistakes, that's time to quit, regardless of where you are. Or you are too lazy to add a color in there and you'll just use any old colors you can get to make work to cover it up, or to cover the canvas. That's the time to quit. Leave it for another session. If you want to get really bright brights, like where the yellow is and all of that, it's better to work off a white canvas, or I like to work off a white canvas. You'll notice that I don't stain it. Not that I couldn't or haven't, but I rarely do. And by the way, I'm not using black in any way, shape, or form here. I make my own blacks, whatever they are. I use alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, or I could use Prussian blue if I wanted even darker, into those, and add a little lemon yellow. I'll get a nice black. I can shift that black by using more alizarin or yellow, I can do all kinds of things with that. But I find black, while I like it, and I have used it recently, in fact, I seem to always go back ultimately to mixing it up, my colors. I do like it, some of those things when you do portrait painting. They do work well. But still, I prefer what I call a rainbow palette. I'll talk about that at some point too. Very clean colors. You'll notice I'm just noodling around here. I use Royal brushes. They're the soft grip, inexpensive. I'll put a link at the bottom for this, the canvas, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I use. It's also on my website under Swing and Paint, which is one of my fun projects that I've been doing for 3 or 4 years, coaching other artists on a lot of different things, painting, marketing, joining organizations, you name it, all of that stuff. Make sure I focus more on presentation perhaps than others because I'm a former designer. I've always been an artist. I just kind of mix that up with the design. And the truth of the matter is I like both, but I probably like design better. Because you're dealing with all space, or three-dimensional space, I guess. Deal with the ceiling, the roof, the floor, the sidewalls, the exterior, the whole 9 yards. Great thing. In painting, we create the illusion of that. So it's a good compromise, and I do like it, enjoy it in fact. Here I'm doing a blockout really of the clouds. It's kind of basic stuff. There's not much blending. It's just getting paint on the canvas. And it's starting to form up the bottom end of the cloud formation. And pretty soon I'll be going into the horizon. So I'm just moving right along there, twirling my brush, happy as I had good sense, listening to the music. Yeah, God help it. I don't change brushes throughout the painting. I don't clean them or anything like that. I just basically use one brush, maybe two. Toward the end, I'll use a flat brush to sign my signature. But I like to keep the brush full of paint. And since I'm really mixing on the painting itself, it kind of works. You'll see it in the, if I ever get the palette stuff going and showing on this, you'll see it there, how that actually does work. I don't hold anything in my left hand to wipe the brush or anything like that. I do that on the palette. So my hands stay fairly clean. Now I'm starting to put in that lower saturated sun color, and it'll soon mate up with the horizon. Adding a little of that here and there. Nice thing about the brush, there's whatever's on it, there's someplace the remaining amount can go. I'm just getting this lower part really dark. so that the sun stands out, and merging all that stuff in back and forth and connecting them up. There's a major movement through here of the dark black clouds that's coming together really nice. You'll notice that I'm extending out the warmer tones up into the black and out and through to the outer sky. This is moving a color across the canvas. You can see how it starts right and moves over to the left in the upper. And I'll continue on doing that throughout this process. And there comes the horizon. So it's now established. In fact, the process now will be to fill in the space and then go back up into the sky and unify it a bit more. The lower portion, this is a great place to stop anywhere through here. But you can see how the sun, since the clouds have been made darker around it, how much more it shines and projects out. One of the cool things about painting. Can't necessarily make it brighter, but you can darken the surroundings and make it brighter. If I have a color on my brush that might go somewhere else, I'll also move over there and put it there before I go for more. We're back up into the sky again, increasing the glow, and again moving it out to the left. This is all about following the light and changing things as you go. To make that happen, lighten it up and I generally like to have the upper part of the canvas complete before I really step into the lower setting below the horizon, especially in a one-session painting, and that's what this is. See, I've taken some of that yellow that I was using, I just bring it down here and kind of slide it in there and all the way down the way. In some respects, I've cleaned my brush right here. When you paint on your canvas directly, in mixing, I should say, over mixing or whatnot, you have to consider what color is already there and adjust for it when you pull color. You know, if it's too yellow or something and you want to make it warmer, then you go down there and get a little red. And you can slam that right in there. And pretty soon we'll have this bottom here filled. And then I think the painting becomes a bit more interesting. It also moves a bit faster. Merging in the darker clouds now so that they recede to the distance. and coming along and accentuate punctuation, really. When I refer to punctuation, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. Kind of leveling up the sky clouds a bit. Since the canvas is only about an hour old, maybe less, the paint is still very, very fluid. And there's a lot of it on there. I believe in more paint. And that lower portion there, now I have it's wet and I can work into it and alter it and modify it and get it to do exactly what I want it to do. The real key to it was a new computer. Which I had to get because my old computer, which wasn't really that old, was not strong enough or capable of editing these videos. The new one is really kind of cool. It is a Skytech. It's lit up, rainbow colors, and even the mouse goes up and down in color. But it's got a lot of power, and that's what I needed to do all this stuff. And now I'm happy. This is a great time to talk about my new setup at the halfway point. As you can see, it has 3 contiguous monitors I can edit. I'm an option trader, so I can watch my stocks. This has a lighted keyboard, which is taking a little bit to get used to, and the Skytech graphics CPU is power behind all this. And here we have Riley and Scarlett. This is Scarlett right here. She's a new addition to the family. She's about a year old. And back to it. Music track is Forgiven Fate by Dan Lebowitz. One of the annoying aspects of filming with the iPhone is that it runs out of storage, and when that happens it stops. And so that area below the horizon, it just cropped up. And so the clip is missing. Not a problem, because this is where I often will clear off paint off my palette and just throw it onto the bare canvas, because I'm going to use it in another way. You know, waste not, want not. Kind of working on bringing the light down to the land surface. I'm sort of in the way, but there are better shots of this when I go into more detail. You'll notice that my shirt is real light, and the reason for that is because I have overhead skylights. And the camera does a pretty good job of evening out the light. especially on the canvas. It's pretty accurate right there. But if I were to modify it and edit, make my shirt as black as it really is, the painting itself would be way too dark. You wouldn't be able to see it. Now on the big screen, you can see the detail in the clouds, and it's not black. It's multiple colors or shades. Today was all about voice overlay and learning how to do that, and editing and deleting more than I've actually accomplished. A lot of retakes in this thing. But I've decided it's going to be finished today, and it'll get posted tomorrow. Because I have a painting on the easel that needs to get finished. But I know how to mix the music now. Selection might not be that great, but the mechanical part of it is under control. I like this particular track. It's True Art, Real Affection, Part 4. Not sure where Part 1, 2, and 3 is, but it's around somewhere. As I thought, I'm pretty much going back up into that sky and working on it. Looks like I'm going to go back up into it again. Now the base is coming into play, and you can see the paint that I put on previous in that area that we weren't able to see is just being worked into the overall design. I'm still not 100% sure what this is going to be. I'm starting to get the clouds to go back. The gray-blue is sort of looks like maybe it's a little bit of a mix. I'll have to come back there and adjust it a bit, and maybe not. After a while, you just got a sense of where to put stuff and when to do it. And all I really have to do is add the gray to the bottom, and that'll kind of balance it out. But you can see the movements going back and forth. They're starting to connect up now with the base. And some punctuations. The original voiceover of this particular area was a little bit better. Maybe what this one will be, but I'll try to do my best to bring it back. These are what I call mile markers, and they kind of start establishing distance and depth. You gotta love learning curves. It turns out my mic fell down underneath my shirt. It was down near my waistline. God. Anyway, we're at the bottom part of this painting, and you see that strokes, the big strokes. That starts to create the shadows of the part that will, yeah, there it's better. You can start to see how another tree or bush is starting to come into play. And I'm starting to break the horizon line, and probably will do that a lot in this process here. Notice the scrape down with the brush. That's taking the brush in an opposite direction of my normal horizontal moves. Just makes brushwork interesting, and lost and found edges improves them. I like this part. Just creating the shadows. You got to follow the light on these things, which is another truism, I guess. If you're painting the sun casts shadows, and you got to follow it out, and it follows out from a perspective point. It radiates out from the sun, so that means your shadows kind of have to follow that, and your light has to follow it. And since I was an interior renderer forever, I kind of naturally do that. I just do it. So I don't think too much about it, but it's really important that you remember where the sun is. And you always want to try to keep a central focus, and that's exactly what's happening here. I'll lighten everything up that's under the sun. Now I'm making some breakups for the water and the sun coming through my bushes. And I do that fairly quickly. Wet into wet is great. You drag the light color into the dark color into the light. And I can't say that you're really cleaning the brush between those moves. You're just going down and getting more paint. And then you kind of spread it out and move it around a bit. I always say the color gets contaminated. Go find a place but put that contaminated color, because there is a place to do it. Notice in the lower sky there, the gray-blue come into play rather nicely because it's playing off the water. I don't know that that was a deliberate move on my part or not, other than I know that the sky has to recess or recede. And so I don't guess I really think about it much while I'm doing it. In fact, I know I don't. Some more marl markers. I'm painting from the shoulder. While I am moving my hand, it's really a lot of it is happening from the shoulder. And when I get arthritis someday, I'll be glad that I did that. All I have to do is hold the brush, thinking in advance, that's all. When you get older, you think about stuff like that. Now, see how the gray is coming down and lightening the whole bottom part? What I like about rerunning these videos or watching yourself paint is that you can see where you made mistakes, or you shouldn't have done something, or you wish you hadn't done it. So it's a good learning tool, videoing yourself, whether you plan to put it on YouTube or whatnot. It's a kind of a simple matter of putting a webcam up and letting it go, and just run it, and then rerun it later to watch your process. It will improve your work. It's made me aware of a couple of things, and now I'm putting the shadows back in, or reinstating them, and then punctuating some of my little spots, my open spots, to bring them out a bit more. I like movements to move straight across or across, so that your eye goes in and out of the canvas. And I do that all the time because I want your eye to go from right to left or left to right, whichever way you choose to do it as you're viewing the canvas. Sometimes I'll even put a fishtail going out of the canvas. It's a no-no, I think, but works. There's a highlight coming in very carefully. The reflection of water is very subtle in this one, because I want the attention to the sky. Sometimes I'll bring it down, but not in this case. And the truth of the matter is I could sign this painting at any point from this point on, but I think I go back up into the sky. And I suppose this is the James River a little bit. Painted that so much I don't need a reference of it, although that's not my intent for it to be that. It's just a setting for that sky. The James has cascading waters, some smooth parts, but the part that I paint off at Belle Island has got rapids. Force 4, I think. It's the only city in the country, I believe, that has force 4 rapids going through it. So we are truly a river runs through it city. I discovered that thing when I first started painting a couple of months in. Spent a couple of months down there painting those rapids, plein air. And a little bit of palette knife here. Sometimes I'll break up edges that way, although I don't do it often. At the end of the day, I like to smooth out areas of a canvas, especially if it's going to be a multiple day canvas, so that I have a smooth surface to start with fresh in the morning, because I will repaint areas or re-wet areas so I can keep the wet and wet going. I'm not too much of a dry brush painter, although I've done a lot of it. I like to keep it fluid all the way. Now back up in that sky. I thought I went back up in that sky. Because it needs some punctuation there to take your eye up. And that side of the sky was, or that side of the canvas was a bit boring. And making the surrounding areas of that lighter area up in the top darker makes that brighter. This is the balancing part of the painting, where you go throughout the whole painting to fix things or make things move better. But mostly it's about directing focus. Breaking up edges, making them more interesting. Painting has to draw you in at, let's say, 30 feet. It has to capture you at that point. But the most important part of painting is when you get up close and personal with it. You want to make it touchable. You actually want someone to want to touch your painting. You know, like you're in a new car lot or a new car show, and all those pretty shiny cars, you just want to go up and touch those things. Well, same thing with the painting. You want to touch it. I want people to touch my work when they walk up to it. I want to be mesmerized by the movement, the texture, and the colors. And if I've done my job well, and they were brought in by the long shot, the thumbnail, let's say, and they start the touchable thing, there's a good chance they might take it home. And maybe not. That's why you have storage. A painting has a life of its own, actually. That's really the closest thing to mortality running. This will last. And if you've done your job right, or well, not right, well, and it finds a home, it'll be protected by that generation, the next generation, and so on down the line. So they do really have a life. And they have to connect with a patron, or they have to connect with a buyer, an owner, and if they do, they find a forever wall. They get taken home and cherished. And so all of that, seeing it at 30 feet, is really important to get the ball rolling. So the painting, I believe anything, if my painting looks good at 30 feet, I believe it. If it needs something, I put a mark on it, and I step back. It may be too bright, or too not look right close up, but if I get back at 30 feet and it looks right, I leave it. I don't mess with it. Sometimes the color has to be bright, and you have to put a saturated color on there to make that movement work. You go in there, you put that paint on, and you gads. You get back, and it's perfect. That means it is perfect. Leave it. Don't go back there and mess it up, and you'll find out eventually on your own. I remember putting a piece of red on a painting, and it just looked too bright, and I got back and it wasn't bright enough. I went back and made it brighter, and that painting worked. And I followed that all along. I've never really stopped that process. Same with the room. If a room needs something, you put the bright pillow in there and it takes your eye there, or you put a light on something, and that sorts it out. Same thing. Design and painting are so intertwined. The rules are the same. Putting a good room together, or a good space, is the same. It needs a central focal point and something to lead you to the next one. I guess the proverbial sofa pillow. Although I think they're just things to make something interesting. Break up a space, an area. And right now I'm adding little highlights to this thing to move the sun out. Because the light also moves down, moves up, sideways and otherwise. So I'm warming up those areas to take your eye through and start moving you over to the left. And you can see there was already some there before. And now that I've brightened up that one, you can see the one to the left. I'd be kind of curious to see if I go over there and do anything with it. Yep. And take it up. And light it up. And see, now I've taken the eyes up. Very subtle color, but it's there. A little bit there. I'm brightening up the lower side of the, or the underside of the cloud there. Move your eye over there, and I break it up. because it was a little bit too much. Fingers work good on this too. A little consolidation of the bright. More lightning. Now I want the light to move over and down to that corner, lightening it up a bit. You notice I twist and twirl the brush. All kinds of interesting things happen with that. There's more of it. I guess some people would call this noodling. But perhaps the most important part of the painting, it's not exactly the last 15 minutes, although it is, actually. Is the most important part. It's whether your painting really works or just works. And I'm sure through a few of these clip takeouts, I've stepped back to my desk, which is about 30 feet away, and checked the painting out. Now I'm kind of straightening up the sky a bit. You see how that starts to square it up a bit with the horizon. The horizon needs to be pretty straight across or flat. Big panorama views you might have a little bit curved, but close up like this, it needs to be more plumb. Pop that a bit. Yeah, there you go, bringing it down. This is that area that was hidden before. And we're almost to the finish. A few more minutes here. We'll get to my favorite part, the signature. And here we go. I use the same, well, this is the only brush change that I made, and that was with a flat brush, and it's a fairly large one. Normally I bring a flat brush out. These two brushes I'll use in a painting. I have a stylized signature that took a little while to develop, but I can do it in a few sweeps. And it's been out there long enough to know what that is. And that's a wrap. And now we go into my intro, or exit I guess, not intro. The painting, cleaned up, details, and close to an exit. Mood and atmosphere, lots of color, touchable. The end.